Ivy Nicholson occupies a peculiar and intellectually fertile position within the cultural ecology of the 1960s. Less a conventional muse and more a liminal figure through whom several transformations in fashion, identity, and visual culture briefly became visible. To reduce her to a footnote in the orbit of Andy Warhol would be to misunderstand the deeper psychological and aesthetic function she performed within that system. Nicholson emerged at a moment when fashion was undergoing a profound ontological shift. The model was no longer merely a vehicle for garments, but increasingly a site of projection, ambiguity, and psychological narrative. In this sense, her presence anticipated the transition from the polished, aspirational femininity of the 1950s toward the fragmented, self-conscious, and often alienated femininity of late modernity. Unlike the archetypal supermodels who would later dominate the 1980s and 1990s, Nicholson's appeal was not rooted in idealization, but in a kind of studied detachment, a refusal to fully resolve into a stable identity. Her involvement with the factory situates her within a radically experimental environment where the boundaries between art, life, performance, and selfhood were deliberately destabilized. The factory was not simply a studio. It functioned as a psychological laboratory in which individuals became both subjects and objects of observation. Within this context, Nicholson's image, cool, distant, and faintly opaque, operated as a kind of surface upon which broader inquiries into repetition, emptiness, and mediated identity could be inscribed. From a psychological perspective, Nicholson can be understood through the lens of what might be termed performative dissociation. Her presence often conveyed an impression of being simultaneously there and not there, engaged yet withdrawn. This quality aligned seamlessly with Warhol's fascination with effective flatness and the erosion of authentic emotional expression in an increasingly media-saturated culture. In films such as Chelsea Girls, the camera does not attempt to reveal an inner truth about its subjects. Instead, it lingers on surfaces, durations, and gestures, allowing the viewer to confront the unsettling possibility that there may be no coherent depth to uncover. Nicholson's screen presence becomes a crucial component of this aesthetic. She does not perform emotion so much as she suspends it. Her contribution to fashion, while less overtly documented than that of more commercially prominent contemporaries, is nonetheless structurally significant. She embodied an early iteration of the model as a conceptual figure rather than a purely commercial one. In Nicholson, we see the beginnings of a shift toward the model as a collaborator in image-making, someone whose psychological texture, rather than just physical attributes, informs the final visual product. This anticipates later developments in fashion photography, where figures such as Helmut Newton and Guy Bourdin would construct highly charged, often unsettling narratives, treating models not as mannequins, but as psychologically complex presences embedded in ambiguous scenarios. It is also worth considering Nicholson's position within the gender dynamics of the period. The 1960s avant-garde often positioned women simultaneously as symbols of liberation and as objects of aesthetic consumption. Nicholson navigated this tension in a manner that resists easy categorization. Her apparent emotional opacity can be read not simply as stylistic effect, but as a subtle form of resistance, a refusal to fully yield her interiority to the demands of spectatorship. In this sense, her detachment becomes strategic. It interrupts the viewer's expectation of access, and in doing so, redefines the power dynamic between subject and observer. Her trajectory also reflects a broader pattern characteristic of Warhol's circle: rapid ascension into visibility, followed by gradual disappearance. This cycle is not incidental. It mirrors the very mechanisms of cultural production and obsolescence. Warhol's oft-cited notion of fleeting fame finds in Nicholson a particularly elegant embodiment. She becomes both product and critique of a system that manufactures icons only to discard them once their symbolic function has been exhausted, and yet, to frame her story as one of disappearance alone would be insufficient. Nicholson's legacy persists not through dominance or visibility, but through a subtle recalibration of what a model can be. She helped articulate a new kind of presence in fashion, one defined not by perfection or transparency, but by ambiguity, tension, and psychological depth. So we return to the question, what does a model reveal when she refuses to reveal herself? In Nicholson's case, the answer is paradoxical. By withholding, she exposes. By remaining opaque, she reveals the very structure of our desire to see, to know, to decode. She does not offer identity as something fixed and consumable. Instead, she presents it as unstable, performative, and fundamentally elusive. And in doing so, she does something far more enduring than simply embodying fashion. She transforms the act of looking itself. What makes this transformation particularly consequential is the historical moment in which it occurs. The 1960s were not simply a decade of stylistic innovation, but a period in which the visual language of femininity was being actively dismantled and reassembled. The rigid codes of post-war elegance, clarity, composure, legibility, began to fracture under the pressure of youth culture, mass media, and shifting social roles. Designers like Mary Quant shortened hemlines, but more importantly, they shortened the distance between the body and its social meaning. Fashion became faster, more immediate, more experimental, and in that acceleration, identity itself began to lose its sense of permanence. Within this shifting landscape, the model could no longer function as a stable ideal. She had to absorb contradiction. She had to carry not just aspiration, but uncertainty. And this is precisely where Nicholson's presence becomes historically legible. She does not resolve the contradictions of her time. She holds them. Her image does not stabilize femininity. It destabilizes it, quietly but persistently. At the same time, the emergence of figures like Twiggy signaled a parallel transformation. Twiggy's androgynous, almost pre-adolescent silhouette disrupted traditional markers of sexuality, introducing a new visual code that was at once liberating and deeply ambiguous. Femininity, in this context, was no longer anchored in maturity or sensual fullness, but in something more elusive: youth, thinness, and a certain kind of visual neutrality. And yet, even this neutrality was highly constructed, carefully mediated, and intensely consumed. Nicholson exists adjacent to this shift, but she operates differently. Where Twiggy becomes a symbol, recognizable, reproducible, culturally fixed, Nicholson resists symbolic closure. She does not become an icon in the conventional sense because she does not offer a clear image to stabilize around. Instead, she introduces a kind of friction into the system of representation itself. This friction becomes even more significant when considered through the lens of gender. The 1960s promised liberation, but that promise was unevenly distributed and often visually contradicted. Women were encouraged to express themselves, yet that expression was still framed, edited, and circulated within systems largely controlled by others. The female image expanded, but it was still expected to be legible, to communicate, to signify, to be understood. Nicholson's refusal complicates this expectation, because what happens when the image does not communicate in the expected way? What happens when it withholds coherence? In that sense, her opacity begins to function not only as an aesthetic choice, but as a disruption of visual consumption. She does not confront the gaze directly. She renders it slightly unstable. The viewer is left without clear interpretive cues, without emotional confirmation, without the reassurance that what they are seeing can be easily categorized. And that subtle destabilization carries with it a deeper implication. That identity itself may not be as accessible or as performable as the culture demands. This idea would echo far beyond the 1960s. In contemporary fashion, where the language of identity has become even more fluid, more self-conscious, more strategically constructed, Nicholson's presence feels unexpectedly current. The model as a fixed ideal has long since dissolved, replaced by figures who oscillate between authenticity and performance, intimacy and distance. What once appeared as opacity now reads as complexity. And yet, the tension remains. Because the demand has not disappeared, it has intensified. We are still looking, still decoding, still expecting images to give something back. And in that sense, Nicholson's quiet refusal continues to resonate, not as a relic of a past moment, but as an early articulation of a condition we are still trying to understand. So if we extend the question once more, what does a model reveal when she refuses to reveal herself? The answer unfolds across time. She reveals not only the structure of perception, but its persistence. She shows us that the act of looking is never neutral, never passive, but always charged with expectation, projection, and desire. And most importantly, she reminds us that what we fail to fully see is often what defines the image most profoundly.